Good Thursday afternoon, and welcome into Grant and Danny, live from Nationals Park, where it is a put it on a postcard pretty day. You are listening to The Fan. In about an hour and a half, we'll be giving away tickets to see Jason Aldean out at Jiffy Lube Live. Make sure you are listening if you want those tickets. But we've been chomping at the bit to get on the air, waiting for this Nats game and post-game to come and go so that we could discuss the massive news of the day in DC sports. The Commanders not just making a trade that I think stunned everybody when they moved Jahan Dotson this morning, but in the division to arch rival Philadelphia and the Eagles, the very rare divisional trade, the Commanders sending Jahan Dotson and a fifth-round pick to the Eagles in exchange for a third-round pick next spring and 2 seventh-round picks.
Tells you they're not worried. Tells you they're not worried about that one coming back to bite him in the tuchus, doesn't it? I mean, that's basically a pick swap between the third round and the fifth round for one of Ron Rivera's first rounders. So now 2 of the 4 no longer on the roster. One didn't get his fifth-year extension picked up. The other didn't even make it to year 3 with the organization. The other one of the other 2 was in the middle of a position switch. And the last one finally is Emmanuel Forbes, who still trying to carve out a role in this league. Just a hard to ignore, kind of the previous years that got us here to this point. But the writing was kind of on the wall here, right? Where a lot of us were speculating, hey, this guy isn't necessarily what we think. This isn't a true bona fide number 2 receiver. This guy isn't necessarily the heir apparent here. He's not going to step in and increase production more than he and Curtis Samuel had last year. And the proof was in the pudding when it started to come to training camp and reps in the preseason games. He was duking it out with guys that are trying to make the roster, trying to carve a role themselves. They were not concerned, it seems like, about Jahan Dotson coming back to bite him with an arch rival, giving up on a first-round pick with 3 years of control left. That's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I think that it's possible they're not worried about him being good enough to make them look bad. I think that's certainly a takeaway. Mine is actually, it doesn't matter who you trade someone to get the most value. So if there's a team willing to give you a 6th or something or a 4th, and you're able to get a 3rd from someone else, do that. I'll trade you to Philly. I'll trade you to Dallas. I'll trade you to the Giants. People care way more about the in-division trade thing than I do. Now, I will readily admit, if you're TJ Watt, I might be less inclined to trade you in the division, and maybe that's the whole point. But where he got traded, to me, is down the list of why this is so fascinating. The fact that after 2 seasons as a first-round pick, including a rookie year that by all accounts was very encouraging.
Very promising.
The only real disappointment in that first year for Jahan Dotson, remember, was the health.
Yeah.
He had a hamstring. In fact, he had a couple injuries back-to-back that kept him out for about a month, and then he came back and was quiet for a couple of weeks. But he really got to a point by the end of the year with Taylor Heineke where he became a legitimate weapon. Remember, he was putting guys in the spin cycle, scoring touchdowns in big games against the Giants, winning jump balls at midfield on contested catches, which was part of what we were told he was going to be able to do coming out of Penn State. To the point where going into last year, everybody felt really good about him.
Yep, I did, certainly.
I predicted he'd catch 70 balls for 1,000 yards. Now, I haven't been more wrong about anything than I was about Jahan Dotson, and I'll wear that today. Having said that, though, I don't think you could find anybody going into year 2, and they were going to throw the ball a lot with Eric Bieniemy, that didn't like this player a ton. Think that maybe he should have been drafted where he was or whatever, but this is a really good football player that's going to help them for many, many years. He's going to get a second contract. That was the path we were on. And then I think partially because Eric Bieniemy didn't do him any favors, and maybe because Sam Howell didn't help his cause, didn't have a very good year. But it's bigger than that, isn't it?
It has to be.
Because now a new staff comes in here, and they make the decision really quickly to move on from him. So the question is, why did they trade him? And it's probably a lot of things, Danny, but among the reasons why he's no longer here, from what I've been told, number one, we've heard people talking about this, whether it was the loss of confidence, lack of urgency, lack of aggressiveness, lack of buy-in, he wasn't practicing and going about drills and things with the same aggressiveness and desperation that the other down the roster guys were. I don't think they loved that. That's number one. Number two, I think part of the reason he's not here is they don't think he's a great fit in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. That happens sometimes. Not to the extent that you move on from a first rounder this quickly, but to go from 3 coordinators now, 4 quarterbacks, like 3 different schemes in 3 years is not easy. And somewhere along the line, they said, he's not playing outside for us. We got to kick him inside. He was moving to the slot. They like other guys as much. So he wasn't a fit, perhaps. Was it more off the field? Was it more on the field? I don't know. But I can't tell you how surprising it was today to see that Jahan Dotson was being dealt. Something we brought up on the show as a possibility. But the last thing I'll say is I don't think Dan Quinn has a poker face. We learned that here. Think about the last week. I don't know who our number 2 is. He can't praise Jamin Davis enough. He can't talk kindly enough about Emmanuel Forbes. Jahan Dotson comes up and he wants to tell you about Olamide Zaccheaus and De'Ami Brown. They just, for whatever reason, didn't hit it off. He and Dan Quinn, he and Adam Peters. And I would say that became pretty apparent today. You can underline and bold that.
Yeah, I thought if he was going to get traded, it was somebody that loved him coming out of school and gave you really good value. This is very little in return for a first rounder that's pretty cheap for the next 3 years. 5th-year option, still way below market value for a guy that would presumably start for somebody, right? This is giving up right now, not being worried about being burned over the next 3 seasons. How confident must you be that at no time will this guy break out because you got the difference between a 5th and a 3rd rounder for him? With years left, what's the rush? Right? Like if you had 2 other guys, rookies chomping at the bit that you had drafted, or another young player that you'd acquired, or something like that it's about to break out and go for 75 catches and 1,200 yards, or something like that as a deep threat opposite Terry McLaurin.
If you just drafted Malik Neighbors to go opposite McLaurin,
you go, this dude's expendable, right? I get that, or any of the dozen of those guys that went in.
But you're clearing space for Byron Pringle and Jamison Crowder,
for Bryson Tremaine at this point. Like, what are we doing? It tells you they thought so little of him that it wasn't even worth having him stick around and find out.
Yeah,
right?
Possibly, yeah.
I can't. That's the part I can't get past is if somebody had called them today and given you a stupid offer, so we'll give you a second for Jahan Dotson. You go, all right, that's a gamble that's worth taking. We'll stockpile. We'll do what we did this past year. We'll have extra assets. We'll be able to move around the board, etc. This is basically a 3rd for a 5th, and the difference therein is where Jahan Dotson lies. That's a very low opinion of somebody.
Yeah, I think that whatever the opinion was, he can't beat press coverage. We don't think he's physical enough. We can't see him being really good in the slot, and that's going to be the role in this offense. Like, I don't know what it was, but it's hard not to assume after you trade a guy for what they did that they just don't think that much of the player. The only caveat to that could be that if, in fact, there was something, like baggage-wise, and I even hate to speculate on that because Jahan Dotson's been such a good dude.
It seemed like that.
He's a great interview. Like, we had him on last year. We've had him on this camp already. Really, really good, interesting, thoughtful young man to talk to. And I like Jahan Dotson as a person, and I will root for him now as a player moving on. But I guess it is possible, if some of the rumblings that we've heard for 2 weeks now are true, they don't like his habits on the practice field or this about him or that about him. It could be a message-sending move, too. Like, maybe they don't despise him as much as a player as what you're suggesting. And they just said, here's our chance to send a message. Having said that, I think there's got to be a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Because, to your point, the leftovers here aren't that good. I have a hard time seeing it because I happen to think this guy can play football. I saw it as a rookie. I know that in golf and in place kicking and at the plate in baseball, you go through these ruts. I have a hard time believing he'll just be in a rut for the rest of his career. But yeah, they obviously think, whether it's in this offense with Cliff Kingsbury or just period, he was not going to help them this year more than the guys they had, which is a pretty big indictment.
Yeah, I mean, the message sent to me doesn't necessarily say a guy, again, with 3 years of control left, the former first rounder. The message could be you're inactive in week 1. The message could be you're benched and Zaccheaus and De'Ami Brown are running with the ones and you're riding the bench till you get your act together. The message is a trade, is that we are no longer interested in your services. And if they'd gotten an unbelievable return, I'd go, okay.
Well, a third rounder is a whole lot more valuable, though, than a guy that you're deactivating. If they viewed it that way. In other words, if they viewed it as he's down the depth chart enough or he's in our doghouse that he's not going to play, then I'd ship him for a third rounder, too. I mean, that ain't nothing. That's Luke McCaffrey, who, by the way, is very interesting in all of this. We should get to him in a minute.
Well, yeah, that's intriguing. But my pushback is 3 years of a first-round pick under team control, who has no rights.
Yeah, they don't care if he was a first-round pick, though. He wasn't their first-round pick.
Well, they should, because they could pick up his option year if they wanted to, right? They are entitled to that. They inherit that. They inherit a first-round pick that's under control for 3 years. They are so unbothered by what he might do elsewhere that they're willing to take a future draft pick. This wasn't before the draft where they got a third round this year. They got next year's third rounder. There's plenty of patience. So if he goes for 600 yards this year, they're going, we're fine. We'll make it up on the back end with another Luke McCaffrey. To me, this is like such a jarring, further down than I thought indictment. I thought he was going to struggle for some playing time, but they gave him up for, again, that gap between a third and fifth rounder. I'm blown away by it. I did not see that coming.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you other than that. I think their receiver room all of a sudden is one that it's hard to imagine they're not going to add to. Could this be the first of a couple of moves? Maybe now you take that draft pick, you take some of the compensation they've gotten back in deals today. John Dotson, remember they traded a draft pick, Cade York coming over, the kicker as well, which we could talk about. But and then try to add another wide receiver maybe at some point. I think that could still be in play. Their number 2 wide receiver at this moment has 12, 5, and 12 catches over the last 3 years. 29 total in De'Ami Brown for 476 yards. And about a quarter of those came in one game on 2 catches against the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
Remember, he had the 75 and the 30-yarder for a 100-yard game. Take that out of the equation. His career is 27 catches for around 375 yards. If you look at the total number of catches for non-Terry McLaurin wide receivers on this depth chart right now, De'Ami Brown, last season, 12. Olamide Zaccheaus, 10. Luke McCaffrey, a rookie, 0. Jamison Crowder, 16. And Byron Pringle, 14. None of the other 5 guys in camp right now had a single catch combined for 0 last year. And all of that is to say that Adam Peters and Lance Newmark in this front office, Dan Quinn, they're betting huge on De'Ami Brown to come of age, on Olamide Zaccheaus to be a ton better than he's been the last couple of years in terms of productivity, or they just think Luke McCaffrey's ready to ride. I don't know which of those 3 that they're really putting their eggs in the basket of, but they clearly either have another plan, they're positioned to make a move now to operate plan B, or the confidence in the rest of that group is stunning. It makes, honestly, not being more interested in Brandon Ayuk make no sense to me. If you knew all along you might cut Jahan, well, I guess he was never going to get cut, but you might trade him. He might not be on the roster. You clearly weren't smitten with him. It's even weirder that they weren't in on Ayuk.
Or anybody in the draft or otherwise early on. The only way this makes sense to me is if it's a Mission Impossible style, and right before the first game, Cliff Kingsbury rips off that form face mask, and he's actually Greg Roman, and they're just going 2 tight ends all the time, and we're just going to run a 2016 Ravens offense or something like that. I've been screaming about this receiver position for months. The pushback to me was, well, Jahan Dotson. I didn't think much of him, and neither did they, it seems like. There is a lot of confidence that somebody in that room is going to step up and do enough, maybe multiple somebodies that don't have a lot of pelts on the wall. That is a scary proposition to me.
First and foremost, an opportunity for you guys to react at 800-636-1067 to the trade of Jahan Dotson to the Philadelphia Eagles. Why do you think they made this deal today? Do you have any issue with it? 800-636-1067 on the MGM National Harbor listener lines. You can get in. The other thing I want to discuss, though, who's the guy that's going to step up? Who do you think they're betting big on? Clearly, they feel really good about somebody in that room, not named McLaurin, to be able to put their necks on the line and trade a guy who's got the most upside, the most talent of anybody other than McLaurin on the roster at wide receiver. So who do you think that is that has given them the confidence to be able to make this trade today? Next on Grant and Danny here on The Fan. Adam Peters has traded Jahan Dotson to the Philadelphia Eagles. We want to know what you think of the decision to do that. 800-636-1067. You want to hop in. Grant and Danny with you on the Fan. We are live on a beautiful day outdoors under a blue sky over at Nationals Park in the left field concourse. The ballpark's now empty, but your boys are enjoying. I mean, you can't ask for a more pleasant day than this.
Oh, it's just perfect and gorgeous. Just us and the pigeons. You know, the cleaning up a couple of peanut scraps and a few other things.
The pigeons are enjoying some peanut shells.
Yeah, they are free and clear to do what they want. But today's just one of those perfect days, man. Just awesome.
Jahan Dotson's third season is going to take place in Philadelphia within the division. He'll play Washington twice if he's healthy this year. Coming off 49 grabs, 518 yards. He was chosen in the first round by Rivera and the Martys. A first rounder added to the pile now of what looks like one missed opportunity, one terrible pick after another. Chase Young at number 2 is on his third team in 10 months. Jahan Dotson's been traded. Emmanuel Forbes is unlikely to start based on the most recent depth chart we have, but has been running as the second corner at training camp quite a bit. And then, of course, Jamin Davis is changing positions and trying to make this roster as a defensive end, it looks like, as he'll get some work as a backup linebacker under Dan Quinn. But it is hard to have 4 first-round picks go that poorly this quickly.
Yeah, it really is. It's damn near impossible. I mean, look at last year. He was out, talking about Dotson, was out caught by tight end 2 in Atlanta, Jonnu Smith. He was out caught by Samaje Perine over the course of the season for an offense that threw it over 600 times. He was outgained as a receiver by names that you have never heard of. Could you pick Wan'Dale Robinson out of the lineup? Would you be able to tell me who Alec Pierce plays for top of your head? I know
Colts.
you do, Grant, but he's a Colt because you probably added him and dropped him on fantasy at one point during a desperate hour. But for the most part, this is a first-round pick who was part of a deal swap that netted Washington Brian Robinson, which is a nice story. That's good. But other than that, they could add Chris Olave, who's thriving and outstanding in New Orleans. And, you know, at the time, some people said, hey, is that really the smart thing? Well, it looked like the Washington won that haul, right? When you get Sam Howell, you're starting quarterback, you're starting running back out of it, and you end up with Dotson still. What a win. Those guys are not on the team. So now it's kind of, you have Brian Robinson left over from it. But what a remarkable turn of events.
I think the key for Dotson moving forward is going to be, he was a 15-yard per catch guy as a rookie, and he was sub 11 yards per catch last year. So he caught almost 20 more balls than the aforementioned gem, Alec Pierce, right? But he's catching 10 yards at a time. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of stuff around the line of scrimmage. There wasn't a whole lot after the catch. You can blame Bieniemy and Sam Howell if you want to, but now you got another staff that's come in here, watched him practice, watched him for an offseason, and decided to move on. They did so for a third-round pick today. They had to send a fifth-rounder to get the third-rounder and some sevenths back for Jahan Dotson. Let's take the temperature of the fan base. Again, 800-636-1067 is the number. Let's go to line 3. Ryan's in Warrenton. What's up, Ryan? How are you?
Hey, guys. What's going on?
Hey, buddy.
This should not surprise anybody. DQ has stated that there's competition at every single position from the top of the roster down to the bottom. Adam Peters came in. We have a plan to rebuild, and that's what we're in. We're in a rebuild. And what did we get for Dotson? We got draft picks. And it fits the plan that he has stated that he wants to do. So this should not be a surprise, given that the roster was in such dire shape. Look at all the free agents we had to sign at the beginning of the year, far more than any other team, just to try to be competitive this year.
But to that point, though, if you're in a rebuild, then you don't trade 24-year-old controllable assets to give more reps to 27-year-old journeyman Olamide Zaccheaus and 30-year-old Jamison Crowder.
Yeah.
If you're in a rebuild, which, by the way, they've never used that word that you just used. They in fact, choose not to. They say recalibrate. They refuse to use rebuild. You don't go out and they sign 20-plus free agents, correct? But most of them are older or veteran guys that are on 1 or 2 year contracts to kind of elevate the immediate floor to help change the culture. They didn't go out and sign a bunch of 24-year-olds to several-year contracts to be in the prime of their career. So I would push back a little bit on like the mess. They're not sending the message that this is going to take a long time. Now, that has been the rhetoric to some extent with Peters, but it certainly hasn't been with Dan Quinn.
Well, we got draft picks, which is what Adam Peters said the plan is to build a team to the future through draft picks. And that's what we got from a guy that wasn't going to fit into, all the reasons that you guys have been stating for the last 3 weeks. So, we're going to bring in a guy that's going to get a fresh new contract, that's going to be a better fit for the scheme, for the offense, and is going to be a future builder from a guy that clearly wasn't going to be the future moving forward. So, this is not a surprise to me.
No, it makes sense, and I appreciate the phone call, but I would say, like, here's the thing. Offenses change so often in this league. Like, if this goes according to plan, Cliff Kingsbury isn't here next year or 2 years from now. Who knows what the next scheme, would he fit that? Wouldn't you have loved to have found out? Making a determination this early on a guy still on a rookie deal where you've got 3 years of control at a really affordable cost for a team that's not in cap trouble, like it's got to be pretty serious. Now, I'm not talking about like some sort of offense, I'm not implying some kind of shenanigans, but you've got to seriously know and have conviction this dude will never help us to move him at this point.
I don't completely agree with that.
I think there's no way around that.
Yeah, I disagree. I think you could absolutely think that he could catch passes for you this year and be a factor and still be incentivized by a third-round pick. But as far as the caller's point that they're adding picks, well, if they just wanted to add picks, then why don't you trade John Allen right now? You could get a third-round pick for John Allen from somebody. Why don't you trade Daron Payne right now for a 2 and a 4 or something? That has not been what they've been doing. Where did they go out this offseason and just start shelling off veterans for picks?
They did it last year before this regime took over.
Correct. To add assets, in the offseason.
Rightly so, by the way.
In the middle of the season at the deadline in a lost year with a bad regime. But yes, that was not the offseason they just had in any way. Let's go to Patrick, who's in Orange on Grant and Danny. What's up, Patrick?
Hey guys, how we doing this morning or this afternoon, I should say?
Doing very well, bud. How are you?
Doing okay. Hey, so I actually like this move because I think it kind of clears the way when you start adding picks. You're adding assets so that you can trade up in the draft or make your offer look better to kind of get the Robin to be the Batman of Terry McLaurin, so that you have a real 1-2 punch in your receiver core. That might not happen this season, but probably gearing up for being or next year when you've got your starting quarterback in his sophomore season.
Appreciate you, buddy. He just mentioned Terry McLaurin.
Mm-hmm.
We should get into what this deal does for McLaurin because he is now a one-man band. Right? Whatever people thought of Dotson before, he was a former first-round pick who had actually shown a bunch on film that he could be good at one point. None of the other guys in this wide receiver room
Nobody's done that.
Check those boxes. So now it's McLaurin who you can take away. You don't have to worry as much maybe about everybody else, at least early in the year, until they prove that they're better than we think. But what does this move do for Terry McLaurin? And who's going to be the guy that eventually steps up? Let's get into that next. Grant and Danny with you on the Fan. Exclusive sponsor of Grant and Danny is the law firm Condorian Moran. They'll guide you and your family in the right direction. They'll help you to draft a will, set up a trust, or create a healthcare power of attorney. Please schedule a free consultation with their estate planning attorneys at kmlawyers.com and be sure to tell them that we sent you so that you can get a discount. kmlawyers.com. We're live all over the DMV on 106.7 The Fan. We're live in Richmond, AM 910, FM 105.1. And you can watch us. We are streaming on video on the 106.7 The Fan YouTube page. Might be a decent day to remember the trade that Washington made moving back so that they could secure Jahan Dotson. Let's go back to draft night 2022. See how this one aged. They're on the clock at number 11. Everybody wants a wide receiver. Luckily, one of the rare times in history where what we wanted and what Ron and the Martys wanted were simpatico.
They lined up and really did okay.
We were seeing it the same way. But let's not take Chris Olave out of Ohio State.
Oh, no.
Who had 72 grabs for 1,000 yards as a rookie or 87 catches for 1,125 yards last season. We're not going to do that. That would be too easy. Let's move back. And so they did. Washington goes back from 11 and takes Jahan Dotson, who they've now traded to the Eagles, for a fifth-round pick. For a third-round pick and a seventh-round pick, I should say. Brian Robinson Jr. and Sam Howell has already been traded to Seattle in a pick swap. They get out of that deal Dotson, Robinson, Howell, and if you want to throw Cole Turner in because they finagled some other picks and moved around the board, I guess you can, although it's not directly a Cole Turner addition via that trade. But even still, Turner on the bubble may not make the roster. Howell's a Seahawk. Jahan Dotson's an Eagle. And Brian Robinson's the last man standing. Chris Olave is on his way to perennial Pro Bowl status. Just one of a bunch of avenues we could drive down if you wanted us to let you know that it was real ugly here for 4 years under Rivera and the Martys.
Yeah, a couple of different folks today were at Nats Park. Came up, towards the end of the game as they're getting ready to leave. And we're like, did they really trade Jahan Dotson today? And, to a man, everyone was like, oh, my man, that Rivera era was really bad, huh? Yeah, it sure was. I was like, listen, he is a below replacement level coach, perfectly fine. They needed that stabilizing kind of proud papa force during one of the most tumultuous times in the nation's history. Totally fine. He handled a lot of things really, really well. But as a personnel person, him and his cronies were disastrous from the start. Disastrous.
It was a fraudulent front office.
Yep.
It was a badly design plan that was executed worse. Ron Rivera had never run a front office. There was no reason to believe he could do that. They gave him all the power. They did the coach-centric thing and had the nerve and the gall when they did it to say, well, look at Andy Reid and look at Bill Belichick.
Because those guys are the same.
So it's like saying, well, James Wood hits a home run when he stands here, so Grant, you stand here. What in the hell are you talking about? I can't do that. That guy's different than me.
Yeah.
But that was their big idea, is Ron Rivera will run everything. And then when you make a move like that, what's really important is who do you surround yourself with? Because I'm not really good at this, and I know that. I mean, they don't know that. They gave me the power, but at least I can, act like I know what I'm doing and hire some grown-ups to help me out. So let me call up the guy that hired me once who's doing morning radio, Marty Herney. That was my big plan.
From the Essex home studio.
And then my agent, knows Martin Mayhew, who was 0 for an entire season as a GM with the Detroit Lions, running their ops. He played here. That'll go over well at the press conference, so let's bring him back. He's not getting another GM job anywhere else, but we can name him our GM. I mean, weird that didn't work out, that you went and hired the guy that always won 7 wins, gave him more influence and power, then brought in 2 people who would never have gotten those titles anywhere else. And, we just kind of sat here going, are we sure about all this? And goodness gracious, was it a rough 4 years. But I don't know how much we need to continue to harp on that today. Times are changing. The new front office is here, and it's pretty apparent they looked at this roster and didn't necessarily love what they saw. There's a bunch of different things I think we need to cover on the Jahan Dotson trade today. Eventually, I do want to get into, could this be the first of a couple moves? Is it possible, whether it's Brandon Ayuk or something else, that this is part one of a multi-part plan for Peters? Would you agree with me that on the surface, it doesn't make a lot of sense, regardless of what you think of Jahan Dotson, with a young rookie quarterback to get rid of a weapon rather than to keep a guy in your room? Just to add a pick, someone said, well, they're rebuilding. They're adding picks. The whole year is about Jaden Daniels, and the receiver room got worse with this trade.
Yeah, there's an empty seat now.
That's the opposite of what you normally would do. You would throw as many receivers as you can at the problem. See the Bears with Caleb Williams. Mm-hmm. They've kind of gone the other route where they drafted Luke McCaffrey. They brought in a couple guys like Zacchaeus and Crowder and Pringle and whatever. But the second highest ceiling guy you had, you just traded for picks. And so now it's McLaurin and the Island of Misfit Toys.
Yeah, I did not think much of Dotson coming into this year. I was wrong like everyone else was going into last year. And to me, I kind of couldn't escape that the idea that we're only blaming two people, that Sam Howell and Eric Bieniemy, for a team that threw it that many times that he was so unproductive. I couldn't get past that. So I didn't think much of him. But this is a prelude to say it doesn't make sense to me if this is the only move. Because to your point, let's say your evaluation isn't 100% right. Isn't it worth it to you to find out for a little while? Just to see maybe he's more of a gamer than he is a practice player. Maybe he does fit in the slot. Maybe, Zacchaeus turns an ankle in week 1, or Jamison Crowder doesn't have as much left by the time you get into, October or November as you previously thought. Maybe he can thrive in the slot. Maybe he and Daniels develop a connection. It's not worth it at all for you to find out. So if this is kind of the solitary move, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
I mean, it's definitely bold from Peters.
That's the word for it.
It's a neck on the line. Not that your job's in jeopardy. I'm not suggesting anything like that in any way, but just you could look bad kind of move if it backfires. But they're zigging when you're supposed to zag a little bit at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Like the idea should be the antithesis of what today was. If I found out a pick was traded and a wide receiver was going in a direction and the Commanders were in on the deal, I would have said, oh, they got Ayuk, or, they traded for a veteran somewhere to help them out, to add to the room because they're not sold on Diami or Dotson or whoever. And it's the opposite. Middle of the pack at best. We've talked about where this receiver room should rank. Somewhere in the, I think, PEFF or the 33rd team had him 17th. That was a little rich for me. You've got him in the mid-20s. I've got him in the high teens or whatever it is. But it got worse. It went the opposite way. And we'll hit the phones, 800-636-1067. I want to go back to one thing you just said, though. You get the sense that people think that the only reason he struggled last year was Bieniemy and Howe. Is that what you're saying?
I heard that a lot.
Well, what I heard was, and I believe this, by the way, as well, or at least what I'm about to say, that part of the reason he struggled was that. There might be someone out there that thinks that the only reason he was bad last year was because of that. I'm saying it would be unreasonable to not assume that a coordinator didn't know what he was doing and didn't have a good plan, and a quarterback who also lost his job didn't help him. Now, he maybe didn't help himself either, but I think it's completely fair to say the guy's been in the league for not even 3 seasons, and he's on his 3rd offense, his 3rd coordinator, his 5th quarterback, I think now. If you want to count Jaden Daniels, you could add Jalen Hurts, you could add to that list. There's been a lot that we talk about with quarterbacks and other positions, why that's so difficult. It can be difficult for him too. If someone told you the only reason he struggled was that, I certainly understand that being annoying. But I think if someone's saying that Bieniemy, who I think there were a lot of guys in the locker room that didn't like him, that he didn't help, and Howell weren't good for Dotson, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't think he was good for anybody, as you see by watered down stats for guys like Terry McLaurin or Curtis Samuel and company. So I don't think I ever said, hey, he's got to be Jalen Waddle, a number 2 that's a 3rd round fantasy pick for most teams. What I am saying is please outgain a fullback. What I am saying is please be moderately productive for a team that's dropping back constantly. Both a coordinator and a quarterback, that neither of which are particularly good, and we know that now, are basically fighting for their league lives, for their identity. And you were out targeted by Logan Thomas. You were, you know what I mean? You were a non-factor. You go weeks without any interest from them.
And that to me is the story, is like, how do we figure out, and maybe we don't need to now, and we've talked about it a lot all off season, but the not being targeted could be because you're not good enough. Could be because you couldn't beat press.
And that's kind of my essential takeaway.
And what I'm saying is, I would feel more confident in saying he's not any good, which you're pretty comfortable saying, if I saw him get the ball thrown to him a bunch and he didn't do anything with it, which I don't think was necessarily the case frequently enough. Now, you got to be open, but you can't throw it to yourself. And I don't know if now as the 3rd receiver in Philly, we'll see. They were obviously intrigued when they watched him go 8 grabs for 108 yards, the only time all of last season where he got double-digit targets. He went for 100 yards and scored the game-tying touchdown at the end of the game. But I'd like to see what it looks like with more opportunities for me. He didn't have enough of those games last year. But to your point, and I think this is totally fair, if you were really good, you probably get more than a couple targets, generally speaking. I think that's true. I just don't know. Is Bieniemy, am I going to stake my reputation on the fact that Bieniemy would force feed you the ball? Because McLaurin went halves without seeing it.
Totally.
Am I going to stake my reputation?
Famous cardio comment.
I don't know if Sam Howell ever starts again. He probably will get a chance in Seattle, but I guess if I'm Jahan Dotson, my point would just be I'd like to see what it looks like with a real coordinator and a real quarterback. Because he didn't have either of those last year, and at least 2 seasons ago, he didn't have a real quarterback either.
Totally. And again, and that's why my point is not I need you to be an all-pro. I need you to be a superstar to put up CeeDee Lamb's numbers. My point is have roughly what Curtis Samuel did, which isn't – no one's going to write home about Curtis Samuel's season last year. 60-some catches, 600-some yards, et cetera. We couldn't even get that. And that's kind of where I'm going here, is that you were for a garbage team that was behind all the time, that did nothing but throw it, you were the 4th or 5th option behind Antonio Gibson certain weeks. It's hard for me to believe that you're just waiting for your opportunity. And certainly it seems like they believe that as well, why they're willing to move on with 3 years left.
Let's go to Greg in Reston on G&D. What's up, Greg? How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. Grant, so back to your point, if you're just piling picks, you just drafted a defensive tackle. Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne would be your move. And then, Danny, what you're saying, it doesn't seem worth it to just see if this guy has anything for the next 2 years. And that just leads me to believe this has to be 70% attitude or work ethic or something, which seems unusual because Dotson seemed like a good guy. But everything DQ's been preaching is going hard, being a dog, out there just trying as best you can. That's the only thing I can get from this, is that there is something there that he was just not coming with that kind of fire to practice. And the only other thing I'll say is it is so refreshing to have Adam Peters, who reminds me of Peter Brand and Billy Beane when he said, you're worried about these moves that you're going to have to explain them. Don't. And he's going up against the golden boy, Howie Roseman, in these 2 trades.
That's
so
a great way to
bold
put it,
of him, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, we're making
find a dance
the headlines again in Washington, D.C. You know, as a fan base, we're sitting here watching a general manager make moves. He had 2 trades today. Mm-hmm. The 7th rounder for Cade York. And I kind of look at that one and I tilt my head and I go, point at him with the Leo meme. I'm like, this is the guy. 24 of 32, missed 8 kicks. All right, let's try it. You know, didn't kick in any games last year because he couldn't crack a roster, but they liked him at LSU. He's got a huge leg. He made a near 60-yarder at one point in a game. He's good from 70 in practices routinely, supposedly. They've evaluated him. They like him. He's got some experience with the assistant special teams coach, from what I was told, on the Giants P squad, I think it was last year. So they made the move. They didn't want to wait a week and find someone who got cut. It's a 7th round pick. It's the compensation equivalent of a ham sandwich.
Yep.
Go get your kicker. So he did that. I like the aggressiveness. And then in this case, the big, bold move. I would not have done this trade, frankly, but I don't have the information they have behind the scenes on what's going on with Dotson. All I can tell you is, and I keep coming back to this, it seems like you're convinced it's all that they don't think he's any good at football. And maybe that's true. I was told that the rumblings of the last few weeks that have not been well-kept secrets. You've heard Brian Mitchell hint at this on these airwaves and other people. I mean, they were, whoever was saying this, and I don't know who it was, but it's been out there. It's not the best-kept secret that they weren't meshing with how he was operating. I don't know why. I don't think he's like a malcontent or a diva. Right. It's a little bit surprising to me. I just don't think they loved the way he was going about his business. And I happen to think that was a big part of what we saw today. Let's go to Kevin in Arlington on G&D. What's up, Kevin?
Hey, fellas. Listen, other than quarterback, I don't know if there's a position that busts more than wide receiver with high picks. Now, I'm not saying Dotson's a bust. I'm not saying that at all. I think there was a fit issue with physicality. Maybe he struggled with press coverage. Hasn't been much in terms of blocking in the running game. I think I don't even know if it's attitude as much as it is physicality and not seeing enough of that. But then I look at the roster, and every receiver is basically 6 foot or smaller except for Luke McCaffrey. Oh, and of course they brought in Pringle a month ago at 6'1" and Bryant at 6'4", but Bryant hasn't played in years. So I look at this roster, I'm like, yeah, they're going to have to fix wide out in terms of getting some size there. And what maybe is the answer is McCaffrey is going to surprise. He's 6'2". They take him play both outside and in the slot. That's what I think is going to happen. I think McCaffrey's going to step up, and we get to November, December, and we're not talking about this anymore. We're talking about Luke is our number 2 or a number 3, and it's obvious.
That would be
That's
a
what I think
massive
is gonna
win
happen.
for Peters
It'd be a
and his
huge win.
staff.
So I wonder what that looks like to folks, because here's where I'm going with this. I don't think anybody steps up. I think the plan is Eckler, Ertz, Sinnott as the year goes, although it sometimes takes a little while for maybe some young tight ends to get their feet wet and acclimated in the league because it's so different. But I don't think they really have a guy that's going to step up, quote unquote, and put up bona fide, fantasy football, number 2 style wide receiver targets, catches, yards. I think it'll be a rotating, this week it's Zacchaeus with 4 catches. Next week it's McCaffrey has his 3. De'Ami Brown will have a game. I think they need guys that block. I think they need guys that are going to be able to protect on the edge when Jaden Daniels is running read option. I think it's tight end stuff. I think it's going to look a lot like 2012 with Josh Morgan as your quote unquote number 2, and he's not a real number 2. He's just he's the guy that happened to be out there opposite Pierre Garçon.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I totally agree with you. I think that's largely what it's going to be. Now, someone's got to catch passes at some point. I always used to say this with like Terrell Pryor. Everyone would point
someone's going to catch one.
His 70 catches for 1,000 yards. Teams throw for 3,500 to 4,500 yards.
Are you purposely bringing that up because I bought it?
No,
aren't you?
not at all.
You brought it up.
I don't even remember you buying it.
I bought it.
But what I'm saying is, quite literally, someone's got to catch the pass.
Yeah.
Now, there's some Ertz in there, to your point. There's some Eckler in there, but wide receivers are going to be involved too. And outside of McLaurin, they're going to have someone. I mean, Josh Morgan went 50 for 500. That's a number 2 season. That's a little better than what Dotson did last year, as an example. Him and Curtis Samuel combined for like 60 for 1,100 last year. Now, it was a different offense.
Mm-hmm.
They threw it 1,000,000 times, and they weren't throwing it to the running back as much as they're probably going to this year. So I think mostly what you're saying is true, but it doesn't mean that there's not a happy medium where all of a sudden De'Ami Brown might be a 40-catch, 470 guy. That would be stepping up, in my opinion. Maybe it's not 70 for 1,000. I'm not suggesting that, but maybe by the end of the year, to Kevin's point, Luke McCaffrey is a guy on the outside on the boundary, can box people out, make a contested catch like he did in the preseason game the other night. De'Ami Brown's been great at camp. He's been excellent in the preseason. No refuting that. We've seen this before a couple times. He has to carry this over to games, because if Peters and Newmark and all the folks in the building are just watching the practices and seeing what he's done in the preseason, they're going, we got it. De'Ami's the guy. I would say go back to the last few years if they still got those film, filed away in the cabinets. Because it was the same thing. We were here for that, and then it didn't transfer. But it is a different offense. They're going to call things differently. And in the same way that maybe Dotson wasn't a fit, maybe De'Ami's the perfect fit, right? I don't know. They clearly like him. I do think Zacchaeus, who they handpicked, is going to be a great fit with what they want to do in the slot and a lot of screens. I think he's going to be a volume guy with, 4 or 5 catch games for 40, 50 yards, and he'll replace some of the Dotson stuff largely. And he's a guy that, from the moment they brought him in, it was pretty clear Quinn had a pass with him. They know him. Like, he's going to be around. But McCaffrey, to me, is the X factor. Brown gets the first shot to really break out. Zacchaeus is going to be a steady Eddie. McCaffrey's the guy as the year goes on and he gets more comfortable, who actually might have a little ability to give them a dimension they haven't had with size, too. 800-636-1067 is the number if you want to join us. It's Grant and Danny. We're live at Nationals Park. Jahan Dotson is a Philadelphia Eagle. We're getting your thoughts on the trade. It became pretty well known that Dan Quinn was not sold on Jahan Dotson as his second wide receiver last week. Came out and said that they were still searching for their number 2. From that point forward, for several days, the discourse around the Washington receiver room has been that Dotson was a trade candidate, could be in some trouble, and that De'Ami Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus had their stock rising. Today, the Commanders traded Jahan Dotson in the division to the Philadelphia Eagles. Even though it didn't come completely out of left field, it's a stunner. And the fact that it's to an arch rival just makes it that much more jarring that he's going to be playing Washington a couple times. He's going to be playing in the NFC East.
Man, oh man. Yeah, I thought there was a chance he got traded, right? I didn't expect it to Philadelphia. I didn't expect kind of such a measly return, to be honest with you, swapping a 5th and a 3rd.
Let's go to Shane in Oxon Hill, who's with us on Grant and Danny. How are you, Shane?
What's going on, Grant and Danny, man? First and foremost, I want to just say that we got fleeced, okay? You know what I'm saying? We got a Super Bowl winning GM and Howie Roseman. He's been there twice. You know what I'm saying? He's seen the talent in Dotson to trade for a 3rd pick to get him, you know what I'm saying? So Dotson will be playing for something meaningful out there. And I just want to say that, Ron Rivera's, his roster gets a lot of flack, but I just want to say that a lot of the good teams, they seen the talent in that, that roster. So we got like Curtis Samuel, he's playing for a good team. He'll be chasing Super Bowls in Buffalo. Okay, we got Kendall Fuller. He's on the Super Bowl winning team. He'll be chasing Super Bowls. So we got also, we could go Cam Curl with LA Rams. They seen the talent in him. He'll be chasing
but
Super
he didn't
Bowls
get
out
any
there.
money. He hit the market. He got nothing.
Exactly.
He got $5 million.
We signed him back. That's even more telling. That's the reason why I'm always upset, because these guys didn't go on big deals, but they were talented, and we could tell that they were talented because they were valued by winning franchises. Okay, and so we could go to Montez Sweat and what they're building out in Chicago.
Well, he's not Rivera's. He
to the
was here when
Pro Bowl.
Rivera got here, which is evident by the fact that he was one of the best players
But
on
we
the team.
traded him away. I'm talking about us getting rid of good talent and the talent going
Sure.
to good teams. Okay, and that's just what I'm speaking on. And I understand Adam Peters wants to do things his way, but let's not make it seem like these guys weren't talented just because they had a lame duck coach. Okay, because coaching in football matters everything. It's chess, and it's about how you play your players and what positions you put them in order for them to succeed. I think that he caught the short end of the stick with EB, and he's on his 3rd year. He had so much time. How we seen it in him? So we ain't even gonna go there, and we know how we.
It's possible.
That's not to say that
Appreciate the call, buddy. Thank you. It is possible that look, you're talking to a guy that likes Dotson's game. I think he's going to be a good slot receiver in the league for a long time. I think he's a decent football player. But the idea that because guys got jobs when they left here, Rivera bringing them here was a good idea doesn't quite work. You paid Curtis Samuel like he was going to be an electric talent. He's making a quarter or a third or whatever of what you paid him in Buffalo. Kendall Fuller was a $10+ million a year corner when you paid him. He's a guy on the Dolphins roster right now. Cam Curl went to the Rams after he was available in free agency, and everyone said, yeah, I'm not going to pay you very much. In Dotson's case, the Eagles didn't bring him in at a first-round pick value. They brought him in at what is basically a 4th-round pick value on a pick swap, essentially, and they said, you can be our wide receiver 3.
So if the criteria is the person that left went to a good team, I guess you got me. But to me, it's more about were these guys in demand? And there was demand for Montez Sweat, to your point, right? And that set this organization
Montez
up
Sweat
very,
is
very
not
well.
a Rivera guy. I just want to reiterate.
No,
that.
I understand it. But if your point is, we here in Washington, we lose guys and they go to good teams.
But he was defending Rivera's roster decisions by saying the guys he brought here ended up, Danny, going somewhere else to good teams. It's like, okay, they got jobs. A, let's see how they perform. But B, it's the equivalent of acting like if CK entrusted us to do afternoon drive and we had terrible ratings, terrible numbers, and then they got rid of us here at the Fan and we went to, Montana where Steve Daines lives. And we did like a show there and we did okay. It's like, they still have a job. Yeah, they're still in the NFL. Congratulations to those guys. Rivera put a lot of eggs in their baskets. The other teams are kind of kicking the tires and saying, let's see what this guy has. There's only 31 teams. Someone's going to sign him. So, yes, congratulations to them that they're on good teams. To defend Ron Rivera's draft history or free agency today is a choice, my friend. Might want to just sit a couple of plays out. It's been pretty ugly. It's been there's blood everywhere. Let's go Benjamin in Fairfax on Grant and Danny. Hey, Benjamin.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
What's up, buddy?
So I'm going to go a completely different direction than that last caller of why this is the absolute correct move. If you've got a guy who experienced all he did last year and the year before it, you've got a new GM, new coach, they are very clear about the kind of player they want, and you are still apathetic and you can't not only earn that second slot, but show why no one can touch it from you, you're not the player for this team. And for getting a third-round pick out of them and the seventh, I'm so happy that they identified, hey, this guy's not going to be our team. Get rid of him now. We don't need that cancer. We don't need to bring on that extra water when we're trying to fix all the holes on the ship. I can do better choices with my third and 2 sevenths than Ron Rivera or anybody did in the last 4 years. So this is 100% the right move, and it's a no-brainer if he's not right for your team.
Appreciate you, buddy. In general, Jeeps, I love the principle of if I'm not, I have to have a couple, like a little flow chart that I make, right? Like it's a little way to operate. If I'm not going to be good when I self-evaluate, and if I'm self-evaluating right now with Washington, I'm not ready to be good yet. I'm on my way. I'm better off than I was, a year ago at this point, but I'm probably not going to be that good just yet. If someone's not going to be here, I trade them. That's my general mentality. There are going to be exceptions. Someone's so good in the locker room or is such a great piece. Maybe I'll extend somebody here and there to help with my transition. But in general, I love that idea, getting rid of guys a year early instead of a year late. This one just seems extra surprising, right? With the fresh start of the new coaching staff, new offense, new quarterback. It wasn't worth it to them just to wait a little bit longer to see if maybe there was a fit down the line. To the caller's point, they seem to know right now.
Well, and to build on what you were just saying, I also have that philosophy of you're not bolted down long-term. I'm moving on from you, but not at the position of weapon or skill guy around a rookie quarterback,
right?
Where I think you should be giving the most receivers, running backs, tight ends, offensive linemen that you've ever given anyone to the number 2 overall pick in the Heisman Trophy.
Something what I would do, yeah.
So a defensive lineman, John Allen, Deron Payne, what have you, I'm willing to shop you. A linebacker, absolutely. If there's a safety somebody wants, what are you willing to give me? But I'm not giving up my weapons that are going to elevate my young quarterback, number one. Number two, I agree with that point, but to me, and this is where we're just going to have to wait and see if Dotson doesn't play well moving forward. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Adam Peters is not an exceptional talent evaluator and that I don't trust him implicitly, because I really do. I think you got a star in Peters. You got a really good one in Newmark. They've got a real front office. And if they were to tell me John Dotson's just not good, he's never going to beat press coverage, he's never going to be good enough at the catch point, with physicality, it's just not going to happen, bro, I would say, okay, tip my cap and move along. I can't unsee the rookie year this quickly. Call it you moved on very fast. A lot of people did. I'm not able to. There were moments in his rookie year that were exceptional. I'm not willing to just forget those really, really fast. I can't. So I think the guy's got some game. Is he what we thought it was at his apex when we're thinking he's going to lead the team in catches last year? No. Is he going to be as good as McLaurin ultimately, like we thought might be a ceiling? Absolutely not. Have I changed my eye line? Of course. But I think he can be pretty good. And to me, that's the whole point in year one of a rebuild, recalibrate, whatever you want to call it. Finding North is Dan Quinn's bit. Mm-hmm. Find North with 24-year-old first-round picks on your roster, please. Find North by getting something out of a guy who's proven he can make a play or two. When you don't have good wide receivers on your roster, like that's who I want to find North with. So that's what coaching is. That's to me what the roster build is finding out how guys like that can help you. Caveat being, if they just think he stinks and he can't play, or if they think he's a malcontent or a cancer, and I can't imagine either of those is true, but let's just say that's the deal, then sure, trade him as soon as possible for whatever you can get back. But if it's not true that they don't think he's bad or that they don't think he's some diva that's going to be bad in the locker room, then I'd like to do the thing that is coaching and just make him the best player possible. So
especially with the rookie quarterback, to your point.
Yeah, let's say he shouldn't have been taken at 16 or whatever pick it was in the top 20. Fine. Let's say he's a second-round talent, a third-round talent. Okay. Then instead of the 70 catches, let's get him to 55 grabs and 650 yards every single year and help Jaden Daniels out with a guy that's probably better than 3 of the other receivers are going to get targets in September right now. 800-636-1067 is the number. Does Danny think that Brandon Ayuk's back on the table? We'll get his thoughts. I'll give you mine on that next on G&D. You'll hear from Cliff Kingsbury coming up at the top of the hour. The offensive coordinator of the Commanders spoke today. He was asked about Jahan Dotson being traded and the wide receiver room left behind by Dotson now. Terry McLaurin, the one proven commodity. He's your clear, unquestioned wide receiver one. Beyond that, who catches footballs for you? De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Luke McCaffrey seem to be the biggest beneficiaries of the Dotson deal. Danny, do you think there's another move coming? Do you think this is part one of a two-part plan where there's a veteran, be it Brandon Ayuk or somebody else on the way? Or do you think this is a trade they made because they were ready to move on and get a draft pick?
I think it's the second one. I don't think they're going to sign like a Juju Smith-Schuster or a Michael Thomas or somebody that's been out there for a while. I don't know if they want to give up draft capital for a veteran and then have to shell out a huge money deal. I think they are deprioritizing that second receiver spot. The way that we think about it is not, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth. The way that me, fantasy players, normal folks that watch football, where they go, the guy that gets second most targets is your number two receiver. Traditionally, that's usually the case unless you have a brilliant slot receiver like an Amon-Ra St. Brown. But they're not viewing it that way. They're going to have the guy that's the starter on the play where you run the ball to the right side. They're going to have the guy that's the starter when they go at a certain personnel grouping that's got a crack back block like a tight end. I don't think they're going to do anything else. I think they are not interested in that position just yet. Maybe it's something they'll build out in the future, but I think this is going to be a Greg Roman run-the-ball style, short pass type offense that's going to feature running backs, tight ends, and Terry McLaurin when appropriate.
I mean, to that point, at one point early in Kingsbury's tenure, they had a number one wide receiver season from like Christian Kirk as an example. And then Ertz was number two in catches, and basically Rondell Moore down the board with a lot of stuff around the line of scrimmage for like 50 and 500 was the next wide receiver. Maybe they feel like that could be Zaccheaus along those lines. But more recently, when he had the personnel to do it, that might have been more out of necessity. They actually did feature a couple of wideouts. Hollywood Brown, 67 for 700. DeAndre Hopkins, 64 for 700. Those guys missed a combined like 13 games that year, so they were both on their way to 80 grabs and well over 1,000. So we've seen them do it both ways, Kingsbury, where you've got two receivers that are heavily involved and featured, and other offenses where it's wide receiver one, tight end running back, and then someone else who just has to help fill out the stat sheet. Let's go to Chudy in Gainesville on Grant and Danny. Chudy, do you think there's something else coming down the pike?
Well, I think people hope there'll be something, but I don't think there'll be another deal. I mean, if we're looking at Brandon Ayuk, I mean, if the 49ers are saying, oh, now you're interested, well, the price for him has just gotten higher because they're going to see desperation. I think they're hoping for whatever is remaining in their wide receiver room to probably break out. So, I mean, I hope it works out for what we have, but I don't see anybody like people have mentioned CeeDee Lamb, people have mentioned T. Higgins, but they're not going to be leaving their teams for Washington anytime soon. So, it is what it is, and we have to go with what we got, I guess. So, yeah.
Those people are funny. They're silly geeks.
That's adorable. Yeah.
They're playing fantasy football. I want to play for their team. That's a talented group. I am more surprised today, Danny, than I was previously that Washington was not in on Brandon Ayuk. If you knew Jahan Dotson was a trade chip or just not a lock to be on the roster, you could have easily included him in any deal with San Francisco for Ayuk and paid him if you wanted to do that. I didn't think that they wanted to give Ayuk the $30+ million and the draft picks to San Francisco that it took to get that deal done. And obviously they didn't in hindsight. But knowing what we know now, I even think there should have been more urgency to get that done. Because I'm pretty, I think Kyle Shanahan would look at Jahan Dotson as a guy that's interesting to him when the other rumors were wide receivers that were much older. I mean, you're getting a 24-year-old former first-round pick who you can move around the formation when Debo's constantly injured. Plus, you're getting draft pick compensation. I'm just a little surprised if they weren't smitten with Dotson already. If this wasn't something over the last couple of weeks that became apparent because he didn't have a good camp or they didn't like his attitude in the building recently or whatever. If they've known this for months, it makes it even more curious to me that they were not major players for Ayuk.
So my thought is they have not known this for months. Because I mean, if you're turning on the tape or you're turning on last year and figuring things out before the draft or some mini camps, stuff like that. Maybe you do this before this year, right? Before this year's draft for extra capital, which is probably worth maybe a little bit more to you. I think this was we're going to be patient and see what we have. And I think they've been so turned off by what they've seen. And again, this is not to imply some sort of something really negative or some story that's hidden or anything like that. I have no idea, but the fit is just not there. It's square peg and there are no holes, right?
Yeah.
And that says
I heard
to me,
they didn't like the fit, but also like the word I kept hearing was urgency, or buy-in. Like, whatever Zacchaeus and Brown and some of these other guys are doing to show how badly they want to be a part of what Dan Quinn's building, they didn't get that same lovey feeling from Jahan Dotson, I don't think, when they watched the practice tape. Let's go to Vic and Akakeek on G&D. What's up, Vic? How are you?
Hey, Vic.
What's up, guys?
Hey, buddy.
So I'm going to draw a comparison here based on the quality of talent evaluation and professional quality evaluation. Mike Shanahan released Devin Thomas. He got rid of Donovan McNabb, and we know what he did with Albert Hainsworth. And those three players were not in the NFL the next year. Well, not in the next 1 to 2 years. And Mike Shanahan was being very coy into the last interview he had before he got fired. What he was saying without saying, these are not professionals. These are not professionals that I'm used to being a 3-time Super Bowl winning coach. And I do believe there are other ramifications that came with Mike at that time, but he knew what winning looked like. So let's compare this to this regime we have now. We have Adam Peters, we have Dan Quinn, we have the staff that they have compiled together. And they have been with winning organizations. They have won. They have won the majority of their careers. They've been in the NFL. And I am a football coach. I'm not talking semantics. Grant, I understand what you're saying. You want a rookie quarterback, especially with the situation we've been in, to have an opportunity to succeed. But as a football coach and as a talent evaluator, I watched Jahan Dotson get out of his break at 100% last year, several times. I watched him drop balls. I watched him not attack his route at the top of his route with velocity and hostility. I watched him not come off the ball and block, what you're doing 70% of the game because you're not getting that many balls because you didn't produce number 2 performance. So when you have a new regime come in that knows what winning looks like and you don't blow them out of the water to show that you're their Alvin Hopper, you're their John Taylor, you are their opposite of Marvin Harrison. I forget his name just for a second. If you
Reggie Wayne.
Reggie Wayne, then you're not going to be here because we're trying to win now.
Well, I appreciate the call, Vic. We're up against the clock.
Thanks,
Thank you.
buddy.
You're rolling. You were strong. I would have let you keep going, but we got to go to the end of the hour and say bye to our Richmond audience first and foremost. But on that, I have a hard time believing, if that's the true reason they got rid of him or whatever, he's the only guy doing exactly what he's doing. In other words, there's no one else that they haven't loved the way they're going about it. Are they trading all of those guys? I guess we'll see. My guess is there's a little bit from column A. It's not a fit. They don't really see it working out in Cliff's offense. And B, they don't like the way he's going about his business. And they go, this guy was a first-round pick 2 years ago. They don't know what we know. Somebody else is going to want to kick the tires. They'll flip on the tape from the rookie year. Maybe talent evaluator Vic didn't see it in his sophomore year, but maybe talent evaluator Howie Roseman saw it as a freshman when he was a rookie in the league, Danny, that he was making plays. And they'll go, we could get a pick for this guy. And a third is not nothing, by the way. That's a pretty decent draft pick. That's Luke McCaffrey, right? That could potentially be something that helps them. But I think it's very possible that they view the totality of their pass catchers through the lens of tight end and running back as satisfactory. And we're just staring at the wide receiver room going, this is it? This is the group? And they're going, yeah, but we actually need that guy to be our 5th best pass catcher. We need that guy to be our 6th best pass catcher.
That's the only way this makes sense to me, is that I'm going, look, this is the problem. And they go, we don't really actually care about that. That's way lower on our priority list.
I just wish they did, though.
That's where I am.
I like this group.
That's where I am.
But I wish they did.
Yep.
I used to say this about Rivera all the time at linebacker or with very edge, whatever issue at the time, the offensive line tackle. Mm-hmm. It's like, I wish they saw it differently. And I feel that way right now about skill position around your rookie quarterback with this group. We should get into that next. Does this affect in any way the ceiling for Jaden Daniels? Obviously, they don't think so, or they wouldn't have made the deal. They think they're just trading an expendable piece. But I think a lot of people in this fan base felt like that was one of the better weapons perhaps they had on offense. Next on Grant and Danny. installment of Grant and Danny today live at Nationals Park. We're in the left field concourse all by ourselves in an empty, beautiful ballpark on the perfect DC day. This isn't summer. I don't really know what this is, but it's the best.
It's false fall.
Is this upper 60s, low 70s?
We are in the 70s. It's going to be, in upper 80s and 90s again this weekend, gross again. But this is just your teaser. This is your appetizer.
I'll take it.
It's to let you know the meal is coming.
It's so nice right now.
Perfect.
Speaking of nice, our buddies over at the law firm of Condori and Murad, taking great care of us here at G&D. They're the official sponsor of this here radio program, and they will take care of your families. They're going to guide you in the right direction, helping you to draft a will, set up a trust, or create a healthcare power of attorney. Schedule a free consultation with their estate planning attorneys at kmlawyers.com. Be sure to tell them that Grant and Danny sent you so that you can get a discount. That's kmlawyers.com. I don't get the sense Cliff Kingsbury loves talking to the media very much. I don't know where you're at on that, but we have seen him talk now a couple times since he was hired. Could be wrong. I know he's very close with Peter Schrager, who's a media member. Just ask Peter Schrager. But Cliff Kingsbury today at the podium discussing the Jahan Dotson deal. Not a whole lot of meat on the bone here. Pretty short answers, but we'll run through some of them. Let's go to Cut One Darris on him discussing the trade of Jahan Dotson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to defer most of those questions to AP and DQ. Had a great experience with him. He's a great kid, and I wish him well. I'm excited about some of the other guys' progress and where that room's headed.
What about the rest of the wide receiver room, according to OC Kingsbury, now that he's had a camp with these wideouts?
Yeah, they all are very conscientious, working hard. Diama's really progressed nicely, so it's been a good room. Very competitive room, and so I'm excited to see how once we get in the regular season, they kind of continue to get better.
Kingsbury expounded upon some of that wide receiver competition today, making receivers, including Dotson, better.
Yeah, great kid. Obviously talented, works hard, and like I said, I like where our room is going, and I love the competition in the room, and I think all those guys made each other better, and I think moving forward, you're going to see that from all of them.
Danny, we're working back from a result, but now you can start to put some puzzle pieces together, right? Like they went and got Zacchaeus and started putting him over pretty quickly. Then you go out to a practice. The first practice I was at, I think I came back and told you, like, he was the most impressive guy, but they also featured him heavily. He was involved in 12 and 11 personnel. Like everything that they did, it seemed like he was on the field. This was Kingsbury on what he's liked so much about Zacchaeus, who he previously hadn't worked with.
Yeah, his ability to really play inside, outside, know the entire system, and be, dogged and blocking and DQ's preaching, our style of play and how we're going to do things. And he answers the bell on every snap, whether he's running routes or asked to block or dig out safeties. And so that's really jumped out on film.
I think they want De'Ami Brown to be the second most targeted guy, number 2 in catches this year behind McLaurin. I'll bet you it ends up being Zacchaeus.
Yeah, number 1, I think it's Zacchaeus. Number 2, you heard him 2 times reference blocking. I think that's
a great point.
I think that's at the core of this. Again, I don't think I'm
like Jahan wasn't willing.
Yeah, or able or whatever. I don't know, but I think that's what's essential here. You saw it already. They tipped their hand to some degree. You see some of the read option. You see some of the outside stuff. Think of Logan Paulson as the personal protector out in front of Robert Griffin. You need that. You need the tight end to be able to do that, and you need slot receivers and outside receivers able to hold up and even win in blocking. I think they're going to not only run it that way, but also think about the little swing pass, the little wide receiver screen, the hitch stuff. What goes underrated there is the blocking of guys on the outside. Everyone will see, Brandon Scherf running from 30 yards away, mowing some guy out of bounds, or Trent Williams out in space. The wide receiver blocking element of that, I think, is essential. I think that's at the core of all this.
Let's listen to Kingsbury on what is important at the wide receiver position. I think you'll be interested.
DQ's style of play, they want to be physical and play hard without the ball. I think that's what we preach is like everybody's going to run routes and make catches at this level, but how do you play without the ball? And you look at some of the top teams in the league, or it's the Chiefs or the 49ers, when they transition to block, when their teammates have the football, I mean, that's kind of the secret sauce that takes you to the next level. And we've been preaching that, and those guys have done a good job responding.
They're spelling it out for you. You might have just hit the nail on the head with the blocking part, which maybe we under-talked about and undersold, so tip of the cap there. But as I'm connecting the dots on just a couple little things I heard today, I kept hearing the word physicality. He has an issue with physicality. He's not physical. And then you hear him talking about DQ style, which is it's two things, right? It's what you say and put on a poster when Joe Witt says, "We arrive violently." But really, that's the shtick. They're walking around in the building with their backwards hats telling you they want to be physical at every position. They want to be the aggressor. They want to be the sledgehammer, not the gnat, or whatever the hell their little saying is, right? And if Jahan Dotson's not blocking, and if Jahan Dotson's not physical, and if he struggles with physicality, and if he's not mauling people after the play and kind of chirping, maybe it's just not their style of guy. I really think that's a big part of this. I don't know that they necessarily think he can't play. Maybe that also is the case. I don't know that they don't think that. But I definitely just don't think that when they came in and they had all their meetings and they said, here are the 10 ways we want you to play, a lot of them just had to do with how you carry yourself on the field and how you block and do this and this and this physically. I think the other guys were doing more of that. And Dan Quinn, like Bill Walsh back in the day in San Francisco, I over-referenced the book that I read recently because it was awesome. It was about leadership and coaching. It's The Score Will Take Care of Itself. But he basically got to San Francisco and he just gutted the place. He's like, I saw one thing from this guy at lunch, told him to go away. You're never going to be on my team. He's like, people hated me. Everyone thought I was an idiot. They were like, why are you getting rid of that guy? He's our best this. He's our best that. And his point was, if you're not willing to march to my orders, you're not going to be here. Maybe that's what we got.
To some degree, it's got to be. And again, the part that I think it sounds like you might disagree with me about, don't put words in your mouth, but is they don't think he's going to turn it around within the next 3 seasons. You know what I mean? Like, not only right now it doesn't fit. He's not getting it. He's not blocking. He's not physical. He's not dealing with this well. He's not handling himself all this well. They've had him really on the grass for a handful of weeks in training camp, right? Because you could have done this earlier if you're just evaluating based on tape or fit or whatever in mini camps and OTAs and things like that. This is now we're here, we're watching this play out, and we're going, not only we don't think he fits in right now, we don't think it's ever going to turn. And we're gonna bail on this thing. We're gonna pull the ripcord, pop smoke.
But you're never going to get a third again.
Well, maybe not. I mean, I have no idea. But like, to me, like the part that I can't get past, and again, I know you don't seem to care about it, but is you would not trade a number. Like there are so few number 2 receivers right now that you'd be able to acquire that are worth a damn between giving up a 5th and getting back a 3rd, right? Like you couldn't do that for anybody that's meaningful at all, right? And the idea that it couldn't happen over a few years, like if he produced decently well, you'd go, God, I wish I could give that 3 back and have him play real well. You know what I mean? Like, of course you'd make that trade every time if he was going to turn it around or had any chance.
Unless you don't think he's a fit for you.
And that's my point, is that you're going, not only is he's not a fit now, fine, but we don't think it's going to happen. So we're going to cut our losses and take.
But if he's not a fit in your offense, why would that change?
If he's talented, if he's good, if his attitude could change. Look, we're here.
I'm saying fit. Sorry, I'm saying like schematically. If they don't think that the way he operates is a fit with what they do,
he couldn't possibly grow into that. I mean, we're here at Nats Park. We talked about this on the postgame show we did today. Luis Garcia had a tough go of it last year. Was overweight, got sent down. David Martinez basically said, "Get right, or you're cut, or that's it." And people want him to lose his job in spring training. He's having a great season and maybe turned his whole career around. That's not possible for Jahan Dotson. Again, and this is coming from someone that doesn't think much of him. But if you're doing this right now, it tells me that they're pretty confident that he was never going to turn it around here for them. And making the move.
I think what's hard is we don't know exactly why they traded him.
Right.
It's very possible that, like, we've given a few different options. They didn't like the way that he worked. Could be a reason. Mm-hmm. They think he's a bad wide receiver. Could be a reason. They think that he's a fine wide receiver who's not a fit for them. Could be a reason. They think he's not worth what they got back for him or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It could be any of those things. If they think he's a bad wide receiver, okay, sure. Then trade him as soon as you can and get whatever you can back. I'm just saying, to say definitively that by trading him today, it means automatic line to they don't think he could ever help them. I'm not willing to go there. Because
I don't see a way around it.
Teams trade people all the time for reasons, to get something back or part of a build or part of, like if the stars don't align and you go, we don't think this guy can help us, but Howie had called me a couple months back and they like him as their 3rd receiver in the slot with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I'll bet you we could get a 3rd round pick, but whatever that is, then maybe all of a sudden it makes more sense. But I don't know. What's interesting to me is why he wouldn't have been a fit or they couldn't have made it work. And that's where I agree with the idea of, to me, that's what coaching is. Like when it's convenient, they say, well, we're going to bend our scheme to the player. That's what coaches always talk about. That's what you heard Joe Witt say, right? They certainly plan on doing that on defense. They're going to find out what guys do well, and they're going to maximize that and turn the faders up on that. Well, if Jahan Dotson did things well, shouldn't you do that on offense then? Shouldn't you have found a way to incorporate him in that way? You see what I'm saying?
I do.
Whereas they didn't seem willing or interested to do that, which is where I think there's just kind of a non-starter from a makeup standpoint. And I hate throwing that on a guy because it seems like he's a good dude, but I just mean in terms of buy-in. That's what I think it's about.
Right. Yeah.
Like he wasn't doing the, like, let me turn my hat around and do my Dan Quinn impression and yell at the cornerback and block him at the end of the play. And Olamide Zaccheaus was. So they liked him better. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying it very well, but the idea that it's not going well for him right now. It clearly wasn't, right? He was in a position battle. He was fighting. I'm talking about Dotson.
Yeah, for about 2 years.
Yeah. So, but for this group, this regime, with hands-on coaching and everything else, it wasn't going well for him. You're basically saying when you trade him today, we don't really think it was ever going to go well for him here. Right? I mean, whether it's, to me, it's irrelevant whether they think he can play, is buying in, not buying in. They're basically saying it was not going to happen.
I see. So you're saying the nuance does not matter.
It matters a little bit less to me. And you're basically, it's because all this is.
See, I care a lot about that, but I understand now what you're saying.
You made a trade, ironically, with the ultimate bettor. Howie Roseman he's my guru when it comes to
Of course it was Howie, by the way, who just like takes the industry consensus, what people tweet, and that's like his philosophy. Now it happens to work sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't.
But it's every move you make is a bet. Right. And here's the bet. It's worth it to us to swap a 5th and 3rd rounder, and that will give us more production than Jahan Dotson over the next 3 seasons at a pretty cost-effective dollar value in terms of the salary cap. That's more worth it to us. That's the bet that they just made. And that balance to me is jaw-dropping.
Peters was, Kingsbury was asked if Peters counseled him at all on the trade. This was the question at the press conference earlier today.
Did AP consult you before the move? And if so, what was that conversation like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into the private conversations on that deal, but like I said, most of those questions y'all can refer to AP and DQ on.
He absolutely did. How could he not?
Yeah.
By the way, we saw video of draft day when they were drafting players, not even guys that Kingsbury had already been working with, meeting with, drawing up plays for, coaching, interacting with. So he has way more intel and experience with Jahan Dotson. But on guys he just watched on film and met with a couple times for 10, 12 minutes at a time before they would make picks of guys like Ben Sinnott. We've seen it. Peters would call him over. He'd go, Cliffy. Kingsbury would walk over and he'd be like, I'm thinking about getting you your tight end here. What do you think? What do you like about this guy? What don't you? Of course they counseled him.
Yeah.
And it's pretty obvious.
Without a doubt.
He didn't stand on the table for Jahan Dotson, to say the least. Might have done maybe the opposite based on the fact that the trade was made. 800-636-1067 is the number. Let's go to Shane, who is in D.C. on Grant and Danny. What's up, Shane?
Hey, what's going on, Commander Danny and Grant?
Hey, buddy.
Hey, all it comes down to is this. It's just Ron Rivera's roster, which has been a joke since he's been here. It's been 4 years of all his players not producing. Let's call it what it is. He had the best defensive tackles in the game. There's most overhyped, from Chase Young to Sweat. Like, come on. It's called production. He did not produce. And if he's that trouble in the locker room, go ahead and move on now. Does it hurt our team? Absolutely does. It does. Well, I mean, you're telling me. But here's what the issue I have is, what is Terry thinking right now? Terry's like, can y'all give me some damn help? Like, seriously, I am one of the top 10, if not, in my opinion, he's the most underrated NFL receiver since he's been in the league. He just needs help. He's not had any help since he's been on this team. And what's to say next year or the year after? He's like, hey, I want out of here. I don't want to be in this organization no more because they're not benefiting from me. So I'm kind of upset, but I like the move because it needs to happen. But at this point, you got to get a receiver going into this league, going into the season. You're telling me that you got Terry and you got Brown as your 1 and 2 right now, and you got Luke.
Well, just think about it this way, Shane. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, buddy.
It's a good phone call as always. Like the passion, Danny. We've watched De'Ami Brown have a couple good preseason games.
Yeah.
And you've seen all the glowing reports out of camp.
Mm-hmm.
And he's looked good by all accounts.
He has, yeah.
Seen it with my own eyes. Seen it before a year ago. I think I left camp tweeting about how involved he's going to be for Eric Bieniemy. I'm sure. But take the last month out of the equation where like his star is rising. Can you imagine if 2 months ago I would have told you that when they come out in a 2-receiver set in week 1, De'Ami Brown has risen to the depth chart at number 2, and Dotson is either unavailable or hurt?
I'd be like, what horrible tragedy befell us?
You would have been like, this is a terrible idea with a rookie quarterback. Now, Shane's right. I'm sure they're going to poke and prod. They have the number 2 pick in the waiver wire. So with every single pick, I saw some people saying, why would they waste their waiver wire pick on a kicker? That's not how it works. They have the number 2 option of grabbing every player that hits the waiver wire in perpetuity.
It's not like your fantasy waivers.
Exactly.
It's rolling.
It resets. No. You're number 2. So when Danny gets cut, only one other team gets a chance at him before you. When I get cut, same. When Ryan gets cut, same. When Darius gets
Carolina's got first pick and they got second.
All the way through. So if there's a receiver they like, they'll pounce. I'm quite sure of that. But are there going to be that many options that are upgrades over Brown's speed or Zacchaeus who knows the system? I don't think there are.
You wouldn't think so.
It's going to be more of the Pringle and Crowder and, that type of thing. Now you've got 2 receiver spots up for grabs for guys like Bryson Tremaine or Martavis Bryant. If you want size, maybe they make the team. A guy like Jamison Crowder or Kaz Allen would have been in, although they're now moving him, it seems like, to running back where he played at the end of the preseason. So it's wide open at the back of the depth chart, but they might go get a veteran and bring somebody in. But a guy like Byron Pringle knows the offense, caught 14 balls here last year, is tight with Terry McLaurin and some of the dudes in the building. I don't know if you're going to do a whole lot better than that on final cutdown day.
I wouldn't think so. But to Shane's point about Terry, I just thinking about the guy. For the first handful of years of his career, it's been the quarterback bugaboo, right? Where you're just getting him disaster after disaster at quarterback. There have been a number of receivers who have fallen victim to that. Now it's, all right, enjoy your double coverage, enjoy your brackets at all times, forever and always, right? Like there's nothing to take the pressure off right now in terms of the passing game. I think that's, it's almost like a comedy of errors in that way, where he just hadn't really had enough help. And he's such a good player. He's not that superstar that's going to put up numbers no matter what the circumstances are. Just a really good player who's probably been robbed of probably 1,000 yards over, cumulatively over the last handful of seasons, and probably twice the touchdowns he should have had just by not having that much around him. But yeah, I just don't think it's a priority for this group the way they're going to do it.
This won't help Daniels. I don't know how much it hurts him if Dotson wasn't going to be heavily involved or was sliding down the depth chart anyway. But I'd say it'll hurt him some.
Right. I
do think this hurts McLaurin because at wide receiver, there's just less guys that the other team is going to have to really worry about and pay attention to. Because while Jahan Dotson struggled sometimes to get off the line of scrimmage, he was an excellent route runner, exceptional route runner, and he could get open and create separation if and when you got him free, which is why I thought Kingsbury with some stacks and some bunches might be able to get him some free releases to help him out. Let's go to Jeff in Herndon on Grant and Danny. What's up, Jeff?
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, you guys. Grant, I think I met you one time a while back when we had the Scherzer
Showdown? Fantasy draft?
Showdown,
yeah, it was a good time. Always loved doing that.
Betty, yeah. Anyway, you guys have been knocking around what I was thinking, whereas, with Terry McLaurin, our best receiver, they're going to double team him or more. And that'll open up some stuff with our scrambling quarterback for the tight ends and the other guys to make some plays. So I'm thinking, barring another trade like you guys are saying, this might work out pretty good.
That doesn't sound too fun for Terry McLaurin, but appreciate the phone call. I mean, they're going to need him to get a lot of attention, perhaps, to help these other guys get going. By the way, end of the show in just a few minutes, we will be giving away tickets to go see Jason Aldean, so make sure you're listening when we wind things down in just a few here on Grant and Danny. Javel's in Culpeper's been waiting patiently. What's up, Javel? How are you?
Hey, dude.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good, man.
Good, man. Good to talk to you.
You as well. I think it's a great trade, Grant and Danny. I think it's a great trade. I think this shows that this was yet another failed draft selection under Ron Rivera. And he was clearly overdrafted. And if you go back to that draft, no other team other than us had him as a late first round or middle to the second round pick. We were the only team that was going to draft him in that position. And you cannot overstate what Ron has done or what he did as an evaluator of talent. This lets us know that Peters and or Quinn and or Kingsbury feels that he wasn't a fit, and all the other receivers on the team were better. And from all other indications, he had a horrible training camp and OTA session. PFF put out about 3 weeks ago, first round draft selections over the past 10 years or so, and their routes run with their targets and their drops. And Dotson was in the field of players such as Laquan Treadwell and John Ross. You didn't hear about those guys.
They're not great names.
The analytics are bad. You're right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the call.
Thanks, buddies. Always.
I saw that list. In fact, I could tweet it out at Grant H. Paulson. But it was, a lot of, at least the list I saw was based on number of routes run, lack of targets, catches on number of routes run, usage essentially. And through a couple of years, he's on a list with a lot of guys that ended up being either busts or big disappointments. So that's not ideal. Now, doesn't mean you're completely out of luck, but it's certainly an ominous way to begin his first couple of seasons in D.C. But it's funny. You're on your way into work today, and you think we're going to be talking a lot about the fact that they may have solved the kicker dilemma with Cade York.
We were going to do a lot of Cade York shtick today.
That'll have to wait till tomorrow.
Yes.
There was a bigger Buffalo wing in the bucket. Jahan Dotson traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. All of our coverage of the Commanders today and throughout training camps presented by Paul Henry's Window Installation. PaulHenry'sWindows.com, your clear home improvement choice. Got to congratulate caller 10 right now at 800-636-1067. You're winning 2 tickets to see Jason Aldean, the Highway Desperado Tour 2024. Friday, August 30th, Jiffy Lube Live. Tickets on sale now. For tickets and more event information, go to thefandc.com/events. Danny, I know you got a little birthday dinner with the fam tonight.
Yes, indeed, my friend. We can't do it tomorrow because my son's got practice until like 8 o'clock at night. So, and that's a little too late for my taste, so we're going to do it tonight.
45 tomorrow for old Danny Huhe. Here's what you guys got to do.
Old. God.
Young 45, though.
Gross.
Athletic, spry, pickleball playing.
Sore, a little
pick
tired.
up basketball shooting. 45. Here's what you got to do tomorrow. Remember, send Danny a nice comment. Maybe it's a tweet. Maybe it's you're on Instagram and Facebook.
Sure, I got all that
Maybe
stuff.
Call and tell Danny happy birthday.
Yeah.
Make it a special one.
Yeah.
Enjoy your big dinner tonight. That's awesome.
Thank you, buddy. I think
are we
Ryan,
going to celebrate tomorrow?
So I think Rhino's going to come over in the morning to play some pickleball, and I
Okay.
think we could probably stop by the Italian store on the way in.
Do some subs.
I guess the way I think that works for everybody.
I do not hate it.
And of course, as a rule, no substitutions. Ready, break.
Do you want cookies? Do you want brownies?
Yes.
Do you want cake?
Yes.
Or there's an or here.
Okay.
Would you like
I didn't know it was multiple choice.
cupcakes?
Again, yes.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
We'll figure it out.
Smell what I'm cooking.
For Danny, the birthday boy tomorrow. Grant, Ryan, Darris saying so long. Thanks for listening. We're back at it at 2 o'clock.
Thank you for coming.